Hello and welcome to another jog vlog session. This one is going to be continuing with coastal landscapes and we're going to be looking at coastal defences today. So by the end of this session you should be able to describe and be able to evaluate different ways to defend our coastline, including hard and soft engineering, but I'm also going to give you a bit of an overview about management of the coast in general, because not all management of the coast involves building a seawall or pumping sand onto the beach itself. So we're going to be looking at management to start with before we then look at these different specific coastal management methods. So get the title written down, and when you've done that, please continue. So we're going to start straight away with a heads and tails match-up activity, just so you've got all the definitions down. Now, this is saved onto 365, and all you need to do is join up the dots effectively. So if you want to get the resource on 365 to save you quite a bit of writing, and all you have to do is a few arrows, then please feel free. And essentially all you're doing is joining up the head with the appropriate tail. Okay, and I'll go through the answers to that and summarize once you've had a chance to do that. So if you want to do that now, pause the screen. And then when you're ready, unpause the screen and I'll go through. But make sure, obviously, if you're not going to do it with the resource, you need to still get the information down. So either way, you're going to need to know and have this in your notes. Okay, so DEFRA are the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, DEFRA, DEFRA. Okay, and they are the government department who are responsible for many things, but one of the things that they are responsible for is protecting the coastline around the UK. Shoreline management plans, or SMPs for short, are plans for short sections of coastline around the UK. I say the UK, I should say England and Wales, really. And they are managed by a group called the Environment Agency. I'll talk about those in a second. And local government. So North Norfolk District Council, for example, plus the Environment Agency will implement these shoreline management plans. I'll talk about those in a second as well. Now, shoreline management plans themselves come under kind of one of four strategies. So anywhere on the coastline, there is one of these four following strategies kind of in place, and it can change as the policy changes. So one of the policies is called no intervention. Okay, that's something you can do to manage the coast, and really, by calling it something you can do, it's a bit disingenuous, because actually no intervention is doing nothing. So no planned investment to defend the coastline against flooding or erosion. If you live in an area on the coast which has got no intervention as the strategy, then you might want to consider moving house pretty quick. Hold the line is another strategy they could do, and that's where they maintain how the coastline currently is. So they will defend it. They'll put some kind of coastal management defences in place. Managed realignment is very similar to no intervention, and essentially the end result is the same. Effectively, long term, they're not going to protect that bit of coastline, but what they're going to do is try and do it in a more managed way. So if you live in a no intervention area, the government won't necessarily compensate you for any possessions lost, your home falling into the sea, all that sort of stuff. But if you live in an area that says managed realignment as the strategy, then they will help manage the process gradually and maybe provide compensation or breach flood defences, intentionally. And so that's another policy decision that could be used at the coast. And a rare one, which doesn't really happen much around the UK, is advance the line. So advance the line is actually building brand new defences to increase the coastline more, the area more. So it might be building up the beach further or increasing the kind of area of land. Now, advance the line is very rare because it's incredibly expensive to do, and so you don't find many places around the UK that have that as a strategy. Now, if you take these four strategies: no intervention, hold the line, managed realignment, and advance the line, within those you could use certain types of defences, flood defences. If it's advance the line or hold the line, effectively there's going to be some defences in place or being maintained or being implemented. So some of those defences could be classed as soft engineering, and some could be classed as hard engineering. Now, soft engineering, generally speaking, is any kind of defence that is trying to work with natural processes, work with the environment. And again, I'll talk a bit more about those later on in this lesson. Hard engineering is literally like, humans against nature. So that involves artificially constructing things or trying to control or stop what natural processes would automatically take place. So it's not really working with the environment, it's literally like put up a big wall effectively to stop the waves attacking the cliffs. So there you go, there are all the matchups. Make sure you've got those correct. And I'm just going to summarise it onto the box on the right, which is yellow. So I'm going to, hopefully, if you just want to put it all together, I would take the yellow box notes for your own notes in your book. So DEFRA, they've got the money. They're the government, they have the budget, and they decide what strategies are going to be in place for each location around England and Wales. So DEFRA provide the cash, and they work out and say, right, well, you're going to be no active intervention. We're going to hold the line there. We're going to manage, realign that bit, whatever. So there are those 4 options they can use. No intervention, hold the line, managed realignment, or advance the line. The Environment Agency and local government, they're the people who take that policy that the DEFRA have decided and they implement it. They work out how it's going to work. So if DEFRA have said Cromer, we're going to hold the line in Cromer, the Environment Agency and the local government of that area are going to say, right, okay, we're going to spend this money here and we're going to spend that money there and we're going to do this, that, the other. We're going to build a seawall, we're going to put some groins in, whatever it might be. Now, obviously, depending on which option that's chosen, there will be different methods of hard and soft engineering strategies, and in some cases, for no intervention and managed realignment, there might not be any defences put in place at all. Okay, so there you go. There's a good summary about coastal management in general, and I know this focuses on defences, but I wanted to have that overview about how we manage the coast. Okay, so once you've got all the notes, you can unpause the screen. So shoreline management plans, just going into them in a bit more depth. We've already mentioned this. DEFRA, they're the government department that are responsible for protecting England and Wales coastlines. And you can see here, this is a section of coastline that is where one shoreline management plan would be in use. So this is a shoreline management plan zone, and it's actually based on sediment cells, but I won't go into that because you don't need to know that until A level. So this area here, this is the Wash in northwest Norfolk, and this area of red is all areas covered by a shoreline management plan. And along all of these different areas around here, you've got Kings Lynn here and you've got other parts like Hunstanton over this side, they will all have a different strategy. So that might have, Hunstanton for example would probably be hold the line. Kings Lynn probably hold the line, but other parts of this coastline might just be do nothing or no intervention or managed realignment. Now, I wouldn't worry too much about if I lived in these areas for those things because these areas don't really erode very much, to be honest with you. This is one of the least eroding parts of the coastline in the east coast of England, because of the geography of the area being effectively like a large bay and very sheltered. However, coastal flooding is another factor, and this is one of the first places in the UK that will flood when sea levels rise to a certain extent. So I wouldn't go start buying your property there just yet. So shoreline management plans, they're run by the Environment Agency and local government, but decided by DEFRA. So the idea of shoreline management plans is to reduce the threat of flooding and erosion to people and the environment in a sort of medium-term and long-term way as much as possible. Try and benefit the environment, society and the economy in line with the government's sustainable development principles. That last little bit means that they don't have to, because if it's going to go in the sea eventually, they can maybe not bother. And there you go. They're the 4 main policies once again that I've already mentioned a few times. So that was just a bit of extra detail about shoreline management plans and what they are. Now, this again is another useful graphic. This is taken from a variety of data sources where they've used the kind of middle estimate about areas that are affected by coastal erosion. So this is coastal erosion in meters up to 2025 if we did nothing around the coast. Okay, so if we just had all of this area of England and Wales unprotected, how much erosion would take place? So what you can see here is you've got red areas are where erosion is going to be 25 metres up to 2025. Okay, now the starting point of this, I don't actually know exactly when. It's probably about 10 or so years old. So in the next 5 years, from when this survey was done, they'd have expected 25 metres worth of erosion. Now that's pretty significant, 25 metres. And large parts of East Anglia, you can see lots of red and orange blobs where it's going to be between 10 and 25 metres. Now green areas are likely to experience less than 10 meters of erosion. So, less than 10 centimeters of erosion, I should say. So that this area around the wash, which you saw in the last slide, not really a key priority for the government in terms of erosion, but that doesn't mean that flooding is not a factor. But look at the west of the country, where the geology is different, where you've got very hard geology, like granite rocks, hard sedimentary rocks, and some metamorphic rocks as well in sort of South Wales. They are all areas where very little erosion is expected to take place, even if you didn't defend it. So again, if we're talking about buying property near the coast, focus on sort of Devon or Cornwall area, guys, or in those green zones, because you're probably going to be all right for a good few years yet. But we don't obviously protect all the coast, and we only protect those areas, and go back to this map, that need protecting. So it would make sense to protect parts of the Holderness coast, for example. It makes sense to protect parts of East Anglia's coast. But they're not going to still protect all these red areas, because there's quite a lot. Again, if you added up all of these kilometres worth of kind of area of risk, there's not enough money in the budget to protect all of them completely. And also, it could be damaging further down the coast if you do. So where do you prioritise, and what decisions do you need to make? Well, firstly, you've got to consider how much it's going to cost to build the defences. If the cost to build the defences is extortionate and we haven't got the money, then they're not going to do it. How many people live there? The amount of settlement. Again, if only 4 people and their dog live there, then it's not worth protecting. It's not worth spending £1 million to protect a home worth 150,000. Maintenance cost. So it's not just how much it costs to build them. Year to year, how much does it cost to keep them effective? What is the value of the land? Agriculturally speaking, does it yield a lot of crops? Is it specifically, valuable mining land, for example? What is the environmental impact of protecting it? There are some parts of the Norfolk coast, for example, that are left to erode because it allows birds to nest in there, put important nesting sites for certain bird species. And again, are you going to protect an area that's going to be underwater in the next 50 years anyway? Okay, so how is sea level rise and climate change going to affect our decision too? So all of these different factors are things that you want to consider that help you determine whether actually do you bother protecting Haysborough? Is it worth it? Does the cost of those defences warrant does it justify how much housing there might be there to protect in the first place? So these decisions are really important, and you don't have to rank them because they're all a consideration. And really, governments and the Environment Agency and local governments need to weigh up, places that they can afford to protect and ones that they probably shouldn't bother. Now, on 365 is a set of A3 or A4 tables, but you can print them out or you can type them in if you want to be neat and tidy, which summarise soft engineering strategies and hard engineering strategies. So for all the places that you want to protect, there are things that you can do to protect them. Now, the GCSE Highland Cal textbook has lots of detail about this, but I would actually say a better version of getting detail for all of these boxes is the internet. So taking the versions that I've put on here on this handout, which you should get from 365 or from me if you want to email me if you can't find it, beach nourishment, I would type into Google if you're at home, beach nourishment, advantages, disadvantages, and that's going to give you a really good bit of detail, and there'll be so many websites that tell you about it. Okay, just make sure you vet it a little bit. Brief diagram if you can, or just copy and paste a picture of it if you can't be bothered. Write a description of what beach nourishment is. What does it involve? Okay. Bullet point 2 or 3 advantages and 2 or 3 disadvantages of beach nourishment. Okay, of that strategy. Then do the same for dune regeneration. Diagram of it or photo if you can get one off the internet. What is it? What are the advantages, what are the disadvantages of it? And there are lots of these. Some of them are soft engineering strategies and some of them are hard engineering strategies. So you've got a handout for every single one of these listed like this on this table, ready for you to use. So there's more information on this website or this PowerPoint for you. So this should help you if you've done that completed table set of like the dune regeneration, the beach nourishment, the seawall, the riprap, the groins, whatever. If you just want to check your answers alongside some of these, I've summarised it for you on the next slides. Okay, so seawall is a nice image there. You can see a poor little muntjac stuck behind one of them. A seawall is either made of stone or concrete. It prevents the base of the cliff from being eroded away, and it might have a curved top. This one doesn't, but to reflect the wave energy away. That would be a description of what a seawall is. So as long as yours is like that, then fine. If it's not, then you probably looked at the wrong thing. Advantages can include it's strong, it's sturdy, it lasts a long time. You can use it as a promenade, so people can walk along it, so that's great for tourism. If you go to places like Hunstanton, they build like there's loads of stalls and stuff selling donuts and like loads of other tat you find at the beach. But it's good for tourism. It's good for industry. Disadvantages are that it's ugly. The exam board would accept that as an answer. And the main disadvantage is it's expensive, and between £5,000 and £10,000 per metre. So if you look at this little tiny section of seawall, which is probably 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 8 or 9 metres, that's that's effectively like about 100 grand's worth of seawall just in one tiny location there. So you can see it can all add up very, very quickly to being in the millions, depending on the area of coast you're protecting. Other disadvantages, the base of it can actually be undercut by the sea, just like a cliff can, because the sea is pretty powerful, especially in stormy conditions. So sometimes they actually place rocks called riprap, which is one of the other defences in it by itself, at the bottom of a seawall to protect it even more. But that's got to be an area really worth protecting. So again, as long as your advantages, disadvantages kind of cover these, then you'll be absolutely fine. So that's one summary there. And there you go, there's an example of where you can place boulders or riprap in front of it. Now, groins, they are, so description of what they are: a low wall built out to sea. It traps sediment or sand moved by longshore drift, and it reduces erosion because the beach itself absorbs the wave energy. So these do not stop the waves attacking the cliff, they stop the waves taking away the sediment, and it's the sediment that protects the cliffs or the land behind. Advantages: a large beach is created. Now that's great, because the reason people go to the seaside is really because it's got a beach they can sit on, they can sunbathe on, whatever. So that's great for tourism. These are probably, in terms of cost effectiveness, one of the best sea defences you can utilise, because effectively over their lifespan they pay for themselves, through the beach they create. It traps sand and pebbles, again reduces erosion effectively as well. Disadvantages: again, they cost quite a lot. If you've got a timber groin, it'll cost about £2,000 per metre, and that's just from timber. And again, you can think of how long a groin is, how many metres that includes. Each groin is going to be, £30,000 to £50,000 probably minimum. It involves quite a long process. You might say, why is wood expensive? But this wood is, marine wood. It's resistant to rotting. It's got big bolts. You need to plough it into the ground quite far, pile drive it in. All of that involves time and equipment. So it's an expensive process. And another disadvantage, which people don't often think about with groins, is further down drift. That area can be eroding more because the sand that was going to them via longshore drift is no longer reaching them. So this is a really good example of a groin in Mapleton, a rock groin in Mapleton, that prevented the sediment from travelling further south, and it caused massive erosion further south that you can see on a map really clearly. Again, if you do a Google Earth search of Mapleton, you'll see this big kind of rock groin out to sea and a nice beach north of it, and then south of that groin you can see it's got huge erosion rates. The coastline visibly cuts back. Okay, so again, your notes should reflect something like this. And there you go, there's another one with just a good example of how one side the sediment is built up and the other side it's quite far down, showing you longshore drift is going on. Oh, there you go, there's Mapleton. You don't even need to look it up on Google Earth here. So there's the rock groin, and this is a nice wide beach that's been built up as a result of the groin stopping longshore drift. And you get further past this bit of riprap here, and this erosion is massive here. But it's low grade agricultural land here, not necessarily worth that much. Whereas this is a farm, and there's a settlement and a nice historic church building there. Riprap or rock armour. Not a very good picture actually of rock arbor or riprap here. I don't know why it's there, but this is essentially big boulders they put in front of the cliffs that the waves attack instead of the cliffs. So they break that wave energy out down quite a lot. So advantages, it's pretty low engineering skill. You dump rocks in front of a cliff, so it is cheap-ish. The rocks themselves cost a lot. So you want a resistant rock like granite, and lots of Norwegian granite is used. And so it's fairly cheap. Doesn't involve a lot of expertise. It's more cheap than it's cheaper than a seawall, for example, though. Or you could use it with a seawall and double bubble. Disadvantages, though, I mean, it's dangerous. It's again quite ugly. I don't think it's that ugly, but dangerous is definitely the case because they've got a kind of metal piling sticking out of them, rusted bits of metal, and people like to climb on them even if they've got signs on that say "Do not climb" because it's almost irresistible to not climb on it. But yeah, ugly, a bit dangerous. There are disadvantages, like there are to all of these methods. There goes another example there. Offshore reefs or breakwaters. Now this one is a very rare one. They don't use it very often, but we have a very good example in our very own county of Norfolk. This is a picture of sea pawling, and they work a bit like natural offshore reefs, which do form. You've got offshore bars that form sediment that interrupts the flow of waves, and it causes the wave to break sooner and lose energy before it reaches the coast. And that causes deposition of sediment and it builds up a beach. Now, by placing these artificial breakwaters, what they're doing is they are doing that process for nature. So essentially they're mimicking natural offshore reefs that would occur at certain parts of the coastline of Norfolk, and disrupting the wave energy and causing that wave energy to dissipate and refract, which deposits loads of sediment. And now this area all behind these reefs is very shallow. You can see it's kind of a nice light green colour, and that's because the sediment is built up quite a lot. And the sediment behind the reefs themselves is built up considerably. Yeah, at low tide you can walk out to pretty much every one of these and go rock pooling, and if you want to, it's a bit dangerous, but it's fun to do. So this is a really good way of protecting the coastline. So they locate it in the sea below the low water mark. So when the tide is kind of high, you might not see them, but when the tide is low, you certainly will. And effectively, again, it's like riprap, but just dumped out to sea a bit further. It protects the shore from all the waves, builds up that beach behind it. Advantages wise, it's good protection, but disadvantages, some people think it's ugly, and actually, arguably, it ruins the view more than a sea wall does, because a sea wall is never really in your sight line. When you go on a beach, you sit on it and look out to sea. But offshore reefs, you can see those because you're looking out to sea. You could have a big pile of rocks, getting in the way of the horizon, which some people might not like. And again, I don't mind them. I think they look all right. And there's gaps, so you should be all right. But this is certainly more visually intrusive than a sea wall or riprap might be. Again, there's another example there. Beach nourishment. Now, beach nourishment is probably the cheapest method that you can do that involves any kind of active defence, and it uses natural material, so it looks quite nice. You're literally using the sand or shingle that would already be on the beach, and you effectively dig up and dredge material that's gone drifted out into the sea a little bit, and you pump it or spray it sometimes, as you can see from this image, back onto the beach a bit higher up. So you're effectively just kind of putting the sediment back where it went. It'd be like a teacher rearranging the tables in a classroom that have maybe shifted a bit. You're putting them back to where it kind of you want them to be, ideally. So it's the same principle there for beach nourishment. And again, it's got a lot of advantages. It uses natural materials. It looks great. Beaches attract tourists to pay for itself, and it's cheap. Disadvantages. There's a couple here. One, you have to keep doing it regularly. Teachers have to rearrange the chairs every day or tables every day because they always move. The same thing happens here. The sediment is always going to be taken away by the sea, not daily, but annually, biannually, every couple of years or so. You need to do this again. The other thing is, which is a far more worrying thing, is that in the 2 years that the sediment's been drifting out, it's been colonised by species. We're not talking about big whales and stuff that you kind of will notice, but small invertebrate species, worms, all those sort of kind of little important species as part of a food web settle in that sediment. So when you dredge it up, you destroy their habitat, which is not particularly nice for them, and it's not environmentally very friendly. But the other thing is, if you dig out those areas, you make that bit of sea deeper, and therefore the wave energy is not dissipated as quickly. So it's got, during high tide, a greater chance of attacking the cliffs long term. Okay, dune regeneration is the one final one I want to talk about, I think. Oh no, not well. This is the one final management method specific one I want to talk about. And effectively, you replant dunes where they would normally be to try and stabilise the area of sand, the sediment that's there. It provides habitats for plants and animals, which is good, and it's naturally a long-term thing that will protect against long-term flooding. So it's a good, sustainable option. But it doesn't happen overnight. You've got to wait a while, and you've got to fence off areas or put these horrible little plastic things around them to protect the sort of establishing plants. And people tend to ignore fenced off areas at the beach. You can see again, look, this one looks a bit tatty. It's not very nice, just to protect this area behind it. So it's worthwhile, but you have to manage it quite intensively if you're going to have success from it. So there you go. You've got hard and soft engineering strategies there mentioned. But one of the other strategies that you could pick, which doesn't really involve building defences, which we've just gone through those as a group, managed realignment is another strategy you can adopt. Now, this is not do nothing, but long term it probably is going to be do nothing. And in an ideal scenario, you would use managed realignment where you've got very little housing, very low value land, something which you can afford to get rid of. And farmland, and the farmland at a place called Abbott's Hall Farm in Essex is a good example of this. So farmland that has maybe a low economic value can often be something you can sacrifice to provide a long-term defence. So if you let the sea erode into that land, or you let it flood that land, you can develop a salt marsh habitat, great for animals, great for species, but also long-term, great for protection. And unless you're in a place like Haysborough, which does have a lot of housing and land that could be lost, and it is going to be somewhere that is going to suffer, unfortunately, long term, you can actually kind of have almost guilt-free. Again, Abbott's Hall Farm is a good example because there's very little housing and it'll be fine. And there's lots of advantages to it. It's cheap. It accounts for future sea level rise. It doesn't need any maintenance. So it's a good option, and you will find that most of the strategies that occur around the coastline of England and Wales are probably along this managed realignment or managed retreat kind of method, because it is the cheapest, and only major areas of settlement are going to be protected because they've only got a certain amount of money. So here is Abbott's Hall Farm, and you can see this is perfect for it because there's a settlement here quite far away, lots of fields that were bought up by the area around that, and what they did was they breached the embankment that was there in several places, and allowed the salt marsh sort of lagoon or the salt marsh to develop, and created new wetland areas where that blue area is. And that is a long-term defence where it provides lots of habitats and great for bird life and things like that, which attracts some tourism as well. So long-term, not a bad plan. Okay, that summarises all the coastal defences and coastal strategies and coastal management that you need to be aware of for this course. So I congratulate you on getting through that little bit, and I will see you next time for another Jog Vlogs.